Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Friday, May 2nd, 2025. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, Hegseth threatens Iran over Yemen. So on Wednesday night, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth threatened Iran over Tehran's alleged support for the Houthis amid the U.S.'s heavy Yemen bombing campaign. Hegseth wrote on X, quote, "Message to Iran. We see your lethal support to the Houthis. We know exactly what you are doing. You know very well what the U.S. military is capable of, and you were warned. You will pay the consequence at the time and place of our choosing," end quote. So a very ominous threat there. And while the Houthis, who are officially known as Ansar Allah, they are aligned with Iran, their political allies. The Houthis do have their own domestic missile and drone program, which means that they're not reliant on military aid from Iran. And this has been acknowledged by U.S. officials, and President Trump has acknowledged that the Houthis actually make their own missiles. As I understand it, Iran helped them, build up this missile and drone program because they have similar missiles and drones to Iranian ones. Probably helped them with blueprints, getting them missile components and things like that. But what we see, it seems like the consensus is that they have a pretty significant independent weapon supply at this point. So Trump said during an Oval Office meeting with Netanyahu last month of the Houthis missile program, he said, quote, "They're experts on missiles. I mean, they actually make missiles. Nobody thought that, but they make missiles. It's highly sophisticated," end quote. So in March, the Washington Post, citing U.S. officials, reported that the Houthis have established their own substantial independent weapons production capability. It's possible Iran is trying to smuggle some things in there, but we haven't seen any evidence of that, over this past month and a half from the U.S. Seems like this is a kind of a phony pretext for war with Iran. So the Houthis also operate independently, and they are not likely to take orders from Tehran. But despite these facts, the Trump administration has been blaming Iran, and Hegseth seems to be referring to Trump's previous warnings, saying that they'll blame every missile fired by the Houthis on Iran. And by that logic, I mean, should Russia attack the U.S. for arming Ukraine as much as they have, which goes well beyond anything that Iran has provided Yemen? But anyway, this threat from Hegseth, this could be frustration with the fact that this bombing campaign after a month and a half has not stopped the Houthi missile and drone attacks. So the next one here, Trump threatens major sanctions on nations purchasing Iranian oil. We have a few Iran stories here that are a bit concerning to start off with. So President Trump on Thursday threatened major sanctions on any country that purchases Iranian oil as he continues to ramp up the maximum pressure campaign against Tehran. He wrote on Truth Social, quote, "Alert, all purchases of Iranian oil or petrochemical products must stop now. Any country or person who buys any amount of oil or petrochemicals from Iran will be subject to immediately secondary sanctions. They will not be allowed to do business with the United States of America in any way, shape, or form. Thank you for your attention to this matter. President Donald J. Trump." End quote. He signed off his post there. So this post is effectively a threat against China because China is the biggest buyer of Iranian oil at this point. And he's saying anyone who purchases Iranian oil will not be allowed to do business with the United States. I mean, I don't think he's really threatening to cut off all trade with China over them buying Iranian oil, but this sounds like they're going to really ramp up, go after people purchasing Iranian oil, just, again, ramping up the maximum pressure, ramping up the sanctions. And this is not good because this next story here, the next round of U.S.-Iran nuclear talks is postponed. So the fourth round of nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran, which was scheduled for this Saturday, has been postponed. Oman, the mediator of the negotiations, announced the delay was due to logistical reasons. And Oman's foreign minister said that new dates would be announced when mutually agreed. The Iranian foreign ministry said the negotiations had been postponed at the request of Oman's foreign minister. U.S. officials are claiming that they never officially confirmed they would participate in the talks this Saturday, and that negotiations could still be held in the near future. But an Iranian official speaking to Reuters said a new date will be set depending on the U.S. approach. And this official made it sound like this is being delayed because of the U.S. continues to increase sanctions on Iran, increase the pressure, make all these threats. The Iranian official said, quote, U.S. sanctions on Iran during the nuclear talks are not helping the sides to resolve the nuclear dispute through diplomacy, end quote. And of course, this news comes after the threat from Hegseth. So again, there's just a lot of concerning things here. There's been this real campaign to smear Steve Witkoff for being involved, from the Hawks, for being involved leading the negotiations. And Witkoff retweeted Hegseth's threat. I mean, if you are really trying to make a deal with someone, is threatening to attack them, the way to go about it, and increasing sanctions. I mean, they just keep adding sanctions, and then Trump comes out with this big thing. So I think right now the prospects for war with Iran or the U.S. supporting some sort of attack, some sort of Israeli attack, have gotten higher with all these kind of developments just in this past day. Again, the threat, delayed talks, and the sanctions threat from Trump, just not looking very good. All right, so the next one here, Netanyahu says freeing the hostages is not the priority. So Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Thursday that freeing Israeli captives in Gaza was not his top priority, comments that angered the family members of hostages. Netanyahu said, quote, we have many objectives, many goals in this war. We want to bring back all of our hostages. That is a very important goal. In war, there is a supreme objective, and that supreme objective is victory over our enemies. And that is what we will achieve, end quote. So it's been clear for a very long time that freeing the hostages was not Netanyahu's goal. It's been very clear pretty much since the beginning, but especially since he broke the ceasefire deal, this ceasefire agreement that would have resulted in all of the Israeli captives being released. But these comments appear to be the first time he's saying openly that the hostages are not his priority, are not his main goal. The Hostages and Missing Families Forum said in a statement that freeing the captives should be Israel's main goal. They said, quote, Prime Minister, the return of the hostages is not less important. It is the supreme goal that should guide the government of Israel. The families of the hostages are concerned, end quote. So Netanyahu's comments came not long after Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said that freeing the hostages was not Israel's most important goal and that the Gaza problem must be eliminated. So Hamas has repeatedly offered to free all remaining Israeli hostages in exchange for a permanent ceasefire. But according to Israeli media, the Israeli government has a long-standing rejection of the proposal. In recent months, Netanyahu has said that his long-term plans for Gaza include military occupation, indefinite military occupation, and ethnic cleansing, which he calls voluntary migration. But when you completely destroy, make a place uninhabitable, starve people, kill so many people, there's nothing voluntary about it. All right, so the next one here, Israeli strikes kill 17 as children starve under blockade. So there's a very sad picture in this story here. Gaza's health ministry said Thursday that Israeli attacks over the previous 24-hour period killed 17 Palestinians and injured 77, as health officials are warning that children are starving under the U.S.-backed Israeli blockade. The health ministry said the body of one Palestinian killed in previous Israeli strikes was also recovered from the rubble. Its numbers account for dead and wounded Palestinians brought to hospitals and morgues. So this photo here is of a 5-year-old boy who's suffering from severe malnutrition, it looks like. And we're starting to see more and more of these pictures. It seems like the families who've been living in tents and are starting, the ones who really don't have the money to buy any, everything, the prices are so inflated, are starting to bring their children into the hospitals because they're suffering like this. And again, we're seeing more and more pictures of emaciated children. And you know, the UN, UNRWA, the World Food Program, they're saying, we have food, we have thousands of trucks lined up, ready to go in, but Israel's blocking it, and this is the consequence of it. These are the people who are suffering, and this is all completely 100% supported, enabled by the U.S. Trump, I believe, could end this in a phone call with Netanyahu. And it's been over 60 days now that this total blockade has been imposed here. And again, there's a quote here from UNRWA saying that they have nearly 3,000 trucks. They said, quote, 1 million children depend on aid, and without it, their lives are in danger. The crossings must reopen, and the siege must be lifted, end quote. Dr. Munir al-Bursh, director of Gaza's health ministry, said Thursday that 92% of children and breastfeeding mothers in Gaza suffer from severe malnutrition, and he called for the UN to declare a famine. So again, it's just such a horrific situation, and we just had the U.S. at the ICJ backing Israel's decision to block UNRWA and to do this to the children of Gaza. All right, so the next one here, Israel's preparing a major mobilization to ramp up Gaza operations. This one is from Kyle Anzelin at the Libertarian Institute. So this is not a good sign here. Tel Aviv is calling tens of thousands of reservists into active duty as the Israeli Defense Forces fights a myriad of wars in Syria, Lebanon, and the occupied Palestinian territories. Many Israeli reservists have already served multiple deployments and are threatening to ignore orders to redeploy. According to Haaretz, Israel is preparing tens of thousands of orders calling reserve soldiers to active duty. The IDF plans to expand military operations in Gaza and wants more soldiers. They need more soldiers. And these reservists, the tens of thousands that they're calling up, they're expected to be deployed all over, not just to Gaza, but to Lebanon, Syria, the West Bank, and Gaza as well. And the Israeli military leadership is drawing up plans to remove Palestinians from the town of Mawasi along the Gaza coast. Israeli troops have forced hundreds of thousands of Palestinians to live in the area, which has become a tent city. Now Israel is claiming Mawasi has become a safe haven for Hamas and must be cleared of all Palestinians. So they're planning to clear the tent camp. This is the Al-Mawasi, which they, before the ceasefire, they declared it a safe zone, but they bombed it. They continued to bomb it. And now they've been really hitting it a lot more, it seems like. And apparently their plan now is to clear that out. And where are they going to go from there? So it looks like things are just going to get worse in Gaza here, unless Trump gets on the phone and tells them to stop. All right. And, people might think I'm exaggerating saying that Trump could stop this in a day. But the fact is the Israeli military is completely relying on U.S. support because it's, all their planes pretty much for the most part are American, which means they need American contractors to maintain them. They need parts. I mean, that's a really big factor. If they cannot maintain their Air Force, then they can't do this. And of course, there's other types of support as well. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. used a GBU-39 bomb to hit the Yemen migrant facility. So DropSite News reported on Thursday that the remnants of a U.S. GBU-39 bomb were found at the location of a U.S. airstrike on a migrant facility in Sadr in northwestern Yemen. According to Yemeni media, the U.S. strikes on the facility killed 68 people, and all the casualties appear to have been African migrants who were detainees at the facility. In response to the reports of major civilian casualties in the strike, a Pentagon official said on Monday that the U.S. was currently conducting battle damage assessments and inquiries into the claims, but so far there have been no further comments from the U.S. military. This picture here is from some of the wounded migrants being treated at the hospital after the attack. So a Yemen-based Ethiopian activist who spoke with survivors of the attack told DropSite that the detention center was hit by 3 separate strikes in slow succession. So saying 3 different strikes hit this facility. Trevor Ball, a munitions expert and former U.S. Army Ordnance Specialist, said the facility was likely targeted intentionally since the GBU-39 bombs are precise weapons and it was struck multiple times. So U.S.-made GBU-39 bombs have been used frequently by the Israeli military in attacks on Gaza, including in strikes on tents. Ball said the remnants of the GBU-39 at the Migrant Center appear to be the first evidence of the U.S. using the bomb in Yemen. The same migrant facility that the U.S. hit was targeted by Saudi Arabia in 2022 in a strike that killed 91 civilians, according to the Yemen Data Project, which means the U.S. should have been aware that attacking the detention center would have caused significant civilian casualties. So I don't know how they justify this. They're not being transparent. I think next week I'll try to see if I could get answers out of the Pentagon to see if they're following up on any of this. All right, so the next one here, the Pentagon may have used social media posts for deadly Yemen attacks. So this is an article from Dropsite News from Ryan Grimm, and this is really a strange story here. So essentially what happened here is that there's some anonymous account on X that's posting like all this open source stuff about Yemen. And the U.S. bombed a location alleged by 2 amateur open source intelligence accounts to be a Houthi stronghold, killing innocent bystanders in the process. A Twitter account operated by an individual whose bio says they are based in the Netherlands apologized this week after the U.S. struck coordinates that she erroneously suggested were the location of an underground Houthi military position. So the strike took place on April 28th, reportedly killed 8 civilians in their homes on the outskirts of the capital of Sana'a. And so essentially this open source person said, "Oh, I was wrong. I'm sorry." And she thinks that the U.S. might have used her information for this airstrike. And, we don't have confirmation from this is just still speculative, but the fact is that they have, as they mentioned in this article, CENTCOM has basically said that, when talking about the Houthi casualties, saying like, "Oh, open source data shows that there's been hundreds of Houthi fighters killed," and open source data is stuff you find on the internet, is media reports, social media stuff. So people suspect that the U.S. might have launched this airstrike based on these open source people. So this is something they're looking into here, which that would just be really outrageous. All right, so the next one here, Israeli drone strike kills 4 in South Lebanon. This one is from Jason Ditz. So Israeli drone strikes against southern Lebanon, centered around the town of Mais al-Jabal, have killed at least 4 people, including 2 Syrian nationals. There were 2 separate strikes involved in the death toll. The first strike targeted a pickup truck, killing 1 Lebanese person within. The second strike hit a vehicle and killed 3 people, 1 Lebanese and 2 Syrians. The second strike slain were labeled civilians by the Lebanese government, and the identity of the first person has yet to be confirmed. And then Israel's claim is that they killed 1 Hezbollah operative in each of these strikes, and this is essentially always kind of what they say. But again, you have the Lebanese government and at least one of these saying that the 3 people were killed were civilians. So the Israeli strikes continue, not every day, but it seems like just about every few days, Israel's still bombing southern Lebanon. All right, so the next one here, Israel sets up new outposts in South Syria overlooking Lebanon. This one is from the Cradle. So the Israeli army is establishing 2 new outposts in the countryside of Damascus, facing the Hasbaya district of southern Lebanon, according to local sources cited by Al Mayadeen. The sources said the first checkpoint was established in the Al-Majbal area located between the villages of Bakasam Rima and Arna, opposite the Hasbaya district in Lebanese territory. And then there's a second military outpost in the Mount Hermon area. So it's just more an expansion of the U.S. military, of the Israeli military presence in southern Syria, an expansion of this occupation that started after the regime change that ousted Assad. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. military aid to Ukraine will count as investments. So the mineral deal that the U.S. and Ukraine just signed will count future U.S. military aid as contributions, as a contribution to a joint investment fund that's set up by this deal. And this suggests that this agreement could increase U.S. weapon shipments to Ukraine. According to the text of the agreement, once it goes into effect, if the U.S. delivers new military assistance to the government of Ukraine in any form, including the donation of weapon systems, ammunition, technology, or training, the capital contribution of the U.S. partner will be deemed to be increased by the assessed value of such military assistance. So they'll get a bigger piece of this investment fund. And the deal only counts future military aid as a contribution to the fund and does not reimburse the U.S. for previous assistance. President Trump was initially demanding that Ukraine pay for all the weapons that Biden sent. So in another sign that U.S. weapon shipments to Ukraine could ramp up, the administration notified Congress on Tuesday, the day before the minerals deal was actually signed, that it was going forward with its first arms sale to Ukraine. So this is the Trump administration's first known arms sale to Ukraine. Obviously, the previous Trump administration was involved in sending weapons to Ukraine, but this is the first one under the new one. The administration said in a notification that it planned to authorize the export of defense articles to Ukraine in the amount of $50 million or more. The notification provided no information about the potential deal, about what kind of weapons it could be. So the weapons deal is being done as a direct commercial sale, and this is when the State Department gives a private company permission to sell weapons directly to a foreign government. And under U.S. arms export laws, the administration is required to notify Congress of one of these sales of defense articles if it's worth $50 million or more. So all they did was say, we're going to do this sale that's worth $50 million or more. That means $50 million is the floor. It's not, the actual sale could be much higher than $50 million. So while the Trump administration has not previously approved new arms deals for Ukraine, it has continued weapon shipments to the country that were approved under President Biden. The shipments were briefly paused after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's contentious Oval Office meeting, but they were quickly resumed after more talks between U.S. and Ukrainian officials. So again, Biden approved, like billions and billions of dollars worth of weapons for Ukraine in different forms. One of them is weapons just being shipped directly from U.S. military stockpiles. The other is like weapon sales that the U.S. is paying for. So those will take, in some of those cases, the weapons are being manufactured. So all the stuff that Biden has approved will take years to be fully delivered. So, they have plenty of stuff to send Ukraine. But the fact that they're approving more sales, this isn't a good sign, because we've seen the rhetoric from the Trump administration, basically that, if we don't reach a deal soon, then that's it. We're going to walk away. We're going to walk away from the peace. We're not going to try to broker this agreement anymore. And the implication, sounds like they're saying we're going to, just not be involved. You guys will just have to fight it out. And we'll so the implication there is that they would cut military aid to Ukraine. But now this minerals deal sounds like that's not, it sounds like they're not going to do that. Sounds like they might just be content with, all right, just letting the proxy war continue. Russia will slowly take over the Donbass, finish taking over the Donbass. We'll keep sending weapons to Ukraine, and that'll be that. And unfortunately, I think that certain people in the administration, that's what they've wanted. And of course, there's been some changes in the administration, which we'll get into in our last story here. But before that, the next one, in Syria, 100 killed in sectarian fighting around the Druze. So this article is from Jason Ditt. So the fighting has been really heavy in Syria, these sectarian clashes in the Damascus suburbs. And this is, there's been the overall death toll in these anti-Druze clashes is over 100 now. And the fighting around the suburb has been the highest toll, with 21 Druze gunmen, 30 pro-Islamist gunmen, and 10 civilians reported among the slain. 40 other Druze have been reported killed in attacks in the Suwaida governorate, including a large ambush targeting them in that area. The anti-Druze sentiment started overnight Monday into Tuesday. An audio recording was released online insulting the Prophet Muhammad and quickly went viral. It was attributed to an unnamed Druze leader, though it has not been confirmed, and it has been speculated that it was specifically released to inflame sectarian violence. And if that was the purpose, then mission accomplished, because attacks on the Druze in Jaramana, which is a Damascus suburb, were happening the very next day. The HTS government promised to investigate the matter, though it is increasingly appearing that they are participating in the violence. Druze spiritual leader Sheikh Hikmat al-Hajiri has criticized the HTS for their role in what he calls a genocidal attack on the Druze community. And I've seen some things on social media, some threats of massacres from HTS aligned fighters against the Druze, and of course we've seen the massacres against the Alawites too. So just not a good. Doesn't seem like this is headed in a good direction. All right, so the last story here: Trump nominates Waltz as UN ambassador. So I just ran the Axios article about this. So essentially, what happened? So on Thursday, one of the first pieces of news that I saw was that Mike Waltz, Trump's national security advisor, was getting the axe. And as I understand it, I didn't read all the different reports, but it seems like it's over the fallout from the Signal Gate thing, from him including what's his name, Jeffrey Goldberg, in the Signal chat. So it sounded like he was going to get fired. And the speculation was, okay, who's going to replace him? Well, then later in the day, Trump came out with this big announcement saying that he's nominating Mike Waltz to be the U.S. ambassador to the UN. And he said all these great things about him. So it seems like they're just removing him from the national security position. And again, I think it's over the fallout from the Signal stuff. This isn't related to, I don't think, how hawkish Waltz is. And he's quite the Iran hawk. So, some people, myself included, we're trying to be hopeful here. Maybe they'll make Steve Witkoff the national security advisor, because it does seem like he really wants to deal with Iran. Well, we don't know yet who's going to be put in this position permanently, but Trump has announced that the new national security advisor, the interim national security advisor, is Marco Rubio. So now Marco Rubio is not only the Secretary of State, but also Trump's national security advisor. He's the first person to be in both roles since Henry Kissinger. So, Marco Rubio, I know it seems like he's gotten a little better recently, but he's always been one of the worst, one of the most hawkish people in the Senate. And him being picked as Secretary of State, I thought was one of the worst picks that Trump could make. So now the fact that he's National Security Advisor and Secretary of State when we're on the brink of war with Iran is just not good. So we'll see. And again, there's all these reports. I'm blanking on the names now of who could potentially be put in that position on a permanent basis. But I just don't think, it doesn't seem like Waltz was removed for being a hawk, for being basically a neocon. So it's just, not the best case scenario here, how this all ended up. So Henry Kissinger, I looking into it, he was both National Security Advisor and Secretary of State between 1973 and 1975. So he was in both positions for a while. It wasn't like a quick thing. So we'll see. I think, there's a chance that Rubio could be in both of these positions, for quite a while here. So that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our Viewpoints. One from Jonathan Cook. The drip of slanted Gaza reporting erodes our sense of right and wrong. One from Doug Bandow. The United States can and should reduce its defense spending. One from Matthew Petty. U.S. Navy accidentally throws $64 million jet overboard off the coast of Yemen. One from Nick Turse. The Vietnam War is still killing people 50 years later. One from Belen Fernandez. Israel openly declares starvation as a weapon. So please go check all that out. You could always support us by sharing this show. Tell your friends about antiwar.com. Like, subscribe, comment. All that stuff helps out. I appreciate all the feedback about the debate that I did and about Dave Smith's show, Part of the Problem. I'll keep those links in the description if people want to check that stuff out. But anyway, this is the last show of the week. It seems like we have some new viewers and listeners recently. And so just for people to understand, I do the show 5 days a week. It comes out kind of a strange time. Like I'm recording right now on Thursday night, and then I release this at midnight. The idea is like, most people listen in the morning, like to the audio podcast. It's like a morning news show. But we release it at midnight. That's when we update our page and everything too. So it's kind of confusing because a lot of people, like especially if you're on the West Coast, you're watching this on Thursday night. I know a lot of people do that, but I kind of cater to the people. The idea is that this is like a morning news show, and most people listen on the podcast. So when the YouTube views get consistently above the audio, maybe I'll cater more to the people who watch or something. I don't know. But that's just, because I know it is kind of confusing for some people at the time that it comes out. But I know people who work like really early hours who really appreciate that I posted at midnight. And I also know some people in Europe who listen to it, and for them it's like first thing in the morning it's posted. So, but anyway, that is it for me. I will be back after the weekend. I hope everybody has a good one. Hopefully we don't end up in a war with Iran by the time I'm talking to you next. That's it. Thanks for listening.